why is it under the gold standard that that the middle class was healthy compared to how the middle class is doing during the fiat standard now?
Yeah, the simple explanation is just the Cantillon era explanation, right? I mean, when you've got fiat money, people can, the people who get the money first benefit the most. They can lever themselves up. When you have gold, before Bitcoin was invented, gold was the only form or the best form of honest money. Silver was a close second. And as a result, people couldn't print and create money and benefit from the leverage that that printed money gave them. And although there was fractional reserve banking, and we've moved from a truly sound money standard in the 1800s into a very unsound money standard on a go-forward basis. It's really been a huge transition that's taken place, such that people who were financially savvy have figured out how to play the fiat game, and the fiat game puts money in their pockets and takes it out of everybody else's pocket. And so we've had all this incredible productivity and technology improvements, and yet all those gains have gone to the top, and they haven't been evenly distributed. And that's why we've got such enormous wealth disparity. And all of that is driven by fiat money. I mean, the people who can control the printing press and can play the game and are smart and know how to benefit from the inflation, they benefit at the expense of everybody else who pays the higher prices. I mean, and the classic example of this is, like, look at a guy like Ken Griffin, who runs, a big risk arb hedge fund in New York City. He blew himself up several times, and in each case, he got bailed out by the Fed, quietly through the back door. And that's how he's able to buy a $250 million penthouse. And meanwhile, and BlackRock, I mean, they borrow money at 0%. They buy houses, they rent them back to people they bought them from, at higher prices. And so the poor working guy has to pay higher rent for a house that he couldn't afford to buy because he couldn't borrow money at 0%. He was considered a credit risk, so he had to pay a much higher rate of interest. So he couldn't compete with BlackRock for that house. And as a result, his excess labor earnings go into BlackRock's pocket. He doesn't get to keep them. And this is why, there's just this incredible wealth disparity and unfairness in the economic system as it's currently constituted. I mean, it's criminal. It's literally criminal what's been done, and to the average people and to the working class of this country. And unfortunately, the saddest part of it all is, the people at the top have managed to get the working class of this country to divide up into Team Blue and Team Red and to throw stones at each other. And what they really should all become is part of Team Orange. And as you know, Team Orange is we're going to throw stones at the central bankers and get back to sound currency. And when we do that, the game will be fair again. But right now the game is just horribly unfair. I don't know. Did I answer that question?
You absolutely nailed it, and I think you described it perfectly. And I completely agree. I think that they so geniusly do it. The orchestration is, if a Democrat is in office, the Republicans are like, all of your problems are because of the Democrats. Republicans in office, the Democrats are like, it's because of the Republican. And the entire time they continue to print money. The deficit spending, I think it's $1 trillion a year. Then they spend more money, $1 trillion a year than they collect in tax revenue. Everyone's just being stolen blind unless you have your money in assets, right? Which is the minority of the country. So yeah, but how long could they keep this going? And then another thing, Lawrence, is they've used wars to get themselves out of this pickle in the past. And I'm looking over at what's going on in Ukraine, and I'm like, these guys are funding a war with a nuclear armed country. What the hell is going on here? Am I seeing things, Lawrence?
$200 billion. $200 billion has gone into, we've shipped into the Ukraine. Yeah, no, it's part of the macro picture. I mean, I like to try and focus on the monetary piece of the picture, but what the government does in other respects informs, the monetary piece. And wars are expensive, and so how do governments fund wars? They print money to fund them. One of the things I think it's important to point out too is the Fed. I said this on another podcast, but I'm not sure everyone here listening to this would have heard that. it's interesting. Preston Pish had a really great chart that he put up on Noster that shows that actually global M2 is actually at a record high and is still growing. And even though the Fed balance sheet is slowly declining as a result of quantitative tightening, the growth in the central bank balance sheet in Japan and the central bank balance sheet in China has outweighed what the Fed has done in terms of cutting. So there's almost a little bit of daisy chaining going on. I see somebody say Ukraine needs help. What should we do? Just let Russia take over sovereign states? I don't want to go deep down that whole rabbit hole. But people who haven't taken the time to really understand what's happening in the Ukraine, I don't know where to start. First of all, somebody this morning compared the Ukraine to Vietnam. Well, as I recall, the people in the Ukraine who Russia is trying to help actually speak Russian. And the part of the Ukraine that Russia is trying to help actually was a part of Russia at one point. And those people were also being bombarded by Nazis in the western part of the Ukraine, who we supported in a coup in 2014. So, it's not as simple as the United States is always the good guy and all these bad countries and guys like Putin are always evil. I mean, I'm not saying Putin's a good guy. He's not. But, we have to take a look at, the splinter, the log in our eye before we go after the splinter in the other guys. I mean, some of the behavior in the United States, the military and industrial complex has spent between $6 and $7 billion or $1 trillion in the past 20 years fighting wars and killing people. And, that benefits a certain class in the United States, but it doesn't necessarily benefit the world and world peace. And so, my view is if we had the ability to defund these wars, which if you had government on a sound money standard, they wouldn't be able to inflate things in a way where they can pay for these wars. We would have a much safer and much healthier world. Ron Paul said it, and I really strongly believe it. It coincides. It's not a happenstance that the 20th century was also the century where we had the most warfare, was also the century of fiat currency.
And these entrenched, very powerful, like, for example, you brought up the military industrial complex, which benefits tremendously. And I'm going to use your word. And Lawrence, I've been using this word because it's stuck with me, right? You said they do not want to give up this privilege, right? So the military industrial complex, they're completely not incentivized to give that up, right? That is how you fund the endless wars without direct taxation, because with direct taxation, I firmly believe you'd have a revolution in the streets the next day.
That's correct.
If people really understood how much they're paying for this thing indirectly.
That's correct. Yeah. People say inflation is hurting me, and inflation is a function of the fact that we shipped, billions of dollars to Halliburton so that, basically, Dick Cheney could become a multimillionaire. So, I got to tell you, I got to get rid of this thread because it's just pissing me off so much. I'm not going to. If people don't understand, if people don't understand the geopolitics of the situation going on right now, they're thinking in fiat terms. Anyone who thinks in Bitcoin terms totally gets the fact that this is all just bullshit, and that these guys are going to start and propagate wars in order to cover up the fiscal and financial, catastrophe that they've created, right? And that's what I see going on. And it's sad because now we actually have nuclear weapons. So, there's the possibility of lots and lots of people dying in this fourth turning if somebody makes a mistake. And, to me, that's crazy and sad. We should basically be negotiating. I would have liked to have thought that nuclear weapons would have been the ultimate thing that would cause everybody to realize that we have to find a non-lethal way of resolving human conflict. And sadly, I don't see that. So,
yeah.